Sorry, everybody is alive. Thank you very much for this fantastic introduction. Now we came to the roundtable discussion. Please welcome to the stage Adam Czerniak, Associate Professor at the Warsaw School of Economics and the head of the Institutional and Political Economy Unit, who will lead the discussion on where to find the money for housing. So, pretty interesting.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, now it works. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Grzegorz, for the introductory speech. I must admit, I'm a little bit scared because you said magic mix. When I came here, I did not know that we will be talking about magic. But okay, luckily I'm not alone here. I have a lot of people with me that I would now like to ask to the stage. Starting with Maria Basilaku, former Vienna deputy mayor. Maria, please come to us. Borislava Gabrowska, senior advisor at European Investment Bank. You will be commenting on Grzegorz magic mix. Johan Miatop, chair of the Housing Policy Working Group, International Union of Tenants, also from Sweden, a Swedish look. Okay, come to us. Georgi Iliev, mayor of Slatina district of Sofia, Bulgaria. Welcome, Georgi. Maximilian Mendel, co-chair of the Urban Living Council, Uli Poland, and also a Polish academic from the Polish Academy of Science. Maximilian, welcome. And last but not least, we had a last-minute change. Sadly, Professor Jadek Sapioło could not join. She called in ill yesterday, but at the very same time, she called her boss from Warsaw School of Economics. Okay, jump in for me. And here she is, full Professor Anna Szelongowska from the SGH Warsaw School of Economics. So, the floor. And as you see, we have a vacant chair. This is not, you can choose either of them. Still, one vacant chair will remain, as I know, Matt. So this is not a cultivation of the Polish Christmas Eve tradition that we leave one chair for an unexpected guest. This is also not the product placement of the new program of Habitat of empty houses and to see the problem of empty houses in Poland. This is the open seat for you, as we'll have a roundtable and you're invited to join us, to talk with us about the magic of how to do proper housing policies here in the region in Europe. Okay, this is, as you can see, a very open discussion, and I would like all my participants to be talkative, very active, but I need to start with Maria. I was listening to your speech yesterday in the morning, and I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember such thing that when you were doing your program on reinvesting and rebuilding due to the energy efficiency policies in Vienna, you were going from one landlord to another. Is that correct, that you said something? Almost, okay. Your mic on, so... Yep.
So thanks. So I referred to the renovation program of Vienna. That was, that started, let's say, in the early 90s. And it has to do with 40% of the overall building stock in Vienna. That is historical. These are fin de siècle buildings, and they were all very derelict. So yes, there was an agency created that more or less, actually to be precise, there were several agencies created. So the idea is to have the so-called urban renewal offices. These are non-profit companies that win a competition. So there's a tender. The city is subdivided in areas. Every company wins the tender for one area. And then what they basically needed to do would be to knock on every door, to talk to all landlords, to talk to all tenants, and to see to it that they not only steer the process of renovation, they also provide the information on the subsidies, because back then, the subsidies were immense, but landlords were not absorbing them.
Okay, thank you for clearing that. I ask you that because that's a really huge entrepreneurship. Yeah. So I was thinking about, when I was listening to you, how we would do that in Warsaw. So to go to every door, to every flat, and to every house in Warsaw, knock on the door of landlords. We did not even have a register. We do not know how many empty flats are here. What are the problems? How do you do that in Vienna? How much money do you spend on it?
So actually, the budget that they had until more or less a couple of years ago was at about 500,000 to 600,000 euros a year. That was the annual budget for one of these offices. And how do you knock on the doors? You just do it. The good thing about doors is that they are physically there; they exist. So, no, I'm not kidding. That's good.
They are there.
They're there. So you have the buildings, and the most awesome thing about what they have done is not only that they took the time to work themselves in the area, of course, that they were taking care of, right? By knocking on every door. But by knocking on every door, they have actually provided invaluable data, socioeconomic data and other data, block by block. So today, if you want to know what is the case in one area in Vienna, you only need to reach out to these offices on behalf of administration, and you can get more or less an X-ray analysis of the area.
Thank you for that. I'm very happy to hear you, but at the very same time, as I remember our national census that we did, we even at the national census did not knock to every door. We asked people to just sign on to internet and say where they are living. So yeah, I would love to see other cities following your experience. Okay, you can jump in whenever you want, really. This is a roundtable discussion, so feel free to just jump in and talk. I would like to be the moderator that stands behind you, just to make your speeches short and not to pick your brains all the time. But okay, I have one more question I need to have. Maria. No, not Maria. Borislava, sorry. Borislava, to you. Grzegorz was talking from a very, bird eye view perspective. And I would like to give us some real life examples of the magic mix. He was addressing the Netherlands, for example. You know that case. He was addressing these beautiful homes and the scale. How do you build the scale to use the effects of scale within providing affordable housing? Do you have any real life example in that?
Thank you for the question. Well, it's very complex, and there are a lot of elements that we need to take into consideration. However, maybe what we do on the ground, and I represent a bank, so it means we give money, but we want this money back eventually.
Interest?
Yes, yes, but this is only a small part of the story. However, as the lending arm of the European Union, we also implement policies, and we work a lot with the Commission on fulfilling some mandates. This gives us the opportunity to have access to resources which we use for our advisory programs. And this is probably where I can give the good examples. So what we do is we develop projects. These projects can be countrywide, can be specific to a city, can be bilateral agreements with the client. But generally, what we try to do is to look for the scale that will help us then really make the difference. And in terms of affordable housing, we've had some history over the last few years. We've had a lot of cities in Poland who benefited from our advisory assistance, which actually also up to now is free of charge for the public sector, because we are the main partner of the Commission to fulfill these policies and really work with the public sector. So we are allowed, and we contribute also from our own budget to these advisory initiatives, together with the money coming from InvestEU under the current budget period. So I will give you two examples. One is an example from the city of Bratislava. It's not only the capital of Slovakia, but also the largest city. More than 10% of the population of the country lives there. And like in many other places, they've been recently experiencing this really steep growth in the prices of housing that is not followed by the same growth in the income levels. So creating this issue with affordability of housing. And the city of Bratislava, they approached us with a request to help them actually build the internal capacity of a special vehicle the municipality established to deal and to implement projects in affordable housing. So what we're doing there is we are engaging with their local team. We have an internal EIB team. Grzegorz can talk about it a lot. We've structured an assignment based on the need of the municipality. And we've also hired external support to help us and them, and all of us are working together on reaching the objective of this assignment, practically to help the city implement this service, generate projects, have a pipeline, know how to manage them, and also one thing that is really critical and very important, to know what others are doing. So under this assignment, actually, I think Grzegorz last week was in Szczecin on a site visit together with a team from Bratislava and the consultants we've hired to work with us on the assignment and see how things are done elsewhere. Because problems can be very similar, but solutions can be also different. And it's really good to know and important to see how the same problems are dealt with in different geographies. And because we are here on this forum that is Europe-wide, I think it's good to also bring up other countries and their experience. And just very briefly, to give you an example of what we are doing in the Czech Republic, it's a countrywide assignment. We've worked on it so far for almost 2 years. So have in mind, it takes a while if you want to really get to the scale of things. But there we are working with the Czech government and really involved into introducing this countrywide policy and structure that will allow them to develop affordable housing projects. There we are working on 2 levels. On the horizontal level, we are supporting them in actually creating the legal framework, which up to now is not allowing financing of such projects by institutions like us. So this is a barrier we will help them to overcome. And then the next layer actually is the practical one, with the generation of a pipeline of projects that they will be implementing over time. So both these assignments are currently ongoing. We still don't have the results. We have some intermediate steps, and we will be able to provide updates, etc., and adjust accordingly our actions based on what we find out during the work. But there are 2, I think, very representative examples of the way we can support actually the actual projects and support the clients in fulfilling the needs that they have identified, citywide or countrywide, it doesn't matter. But it's really important to have the political will and the engagement longer term. Otherwise, you make 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I written down from your speech 2 main points. One is what you said at the end, that you need political commitment, long-term political commitment, which is very important no matter what the institutions are. And the second thing is the institutions itself. So a solution that works in one city might not work in another city, or one country, it might not work in another country. So it's very important to tailor-made all the solutions. That's why when you come in, so say, okay, we have that kind of spectrum of solutions for you, but now we need to choose the one that's working here and now. Okay. Oh, wonderful that you sit together. The north and south of Europe, so it's Sweden and Bulgaria. Okay, Sweden has a very long history of reforming its housing market, delivering affordable housing, with its ups and downs. So not everything was perfect, but still, many countries here in Central and Eastern Europe do look up to Sweden, say, oh, how they managed to do it. Okay, what would you say, Johan, to Georgi, as an advice, how to tackle affordable housing problems? Johan, you start.
Thank you. I don't know if I should answer as the Swedish Union of Tenants or the International Union of Tenants. I have two legs. I'm standing on both of them. But I think I'm advertised as International Union of Tenants. Now, in such case, I think we should start from the magic side of it. Because, of course, housing is not just any goods. It's just not it's not a regular market. It's not about apples, oranges, bananas, or toaster ovens. We are talking about a good or a public good or whatever that everybody needs.
And there's a second thing to it. A very difficult word, heterogeneity. Each housing unit is different. So we do not have like apples, 1,000 apples are exactly the same or almost exactly the same, but you have each housing unit that is different, and it satisfies in a little bit different way the housing needs of the population.
So then to take a step back from these kind of relatively concrete proposals we had from the other side, I think we need to define the rules of the game. We have to start thinking about housing as a fundamental right, as expressed in the UN, the Universal Declaration or the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. This is a good that states, governments and regional and local levels must agree on and act on. And housing shortage is not it's not a force of nature. It's not a constant. It is something we can do about. But of course, it requires commitment and funding. And we already heard the mention of commitment from the other side of the table. The next step is, of course, where is the money? That is the most exactly. We might talk about it later over a coffee. No, but if I then look at private investment, it's not something we really spend too much time on in the framework of the International Union of Tenants. We often talk about public funding in some way or the other, and then of course we inevitably end up in the EU state aid discussion, which seems to be eternal. It's been there as long as I can remember, and maybe there are people longer in the business than I am that also remember it. But of course, in general, state aid has a very narrow scope. It is limited normally to environment and infrastructure investments. And that is kind of, you have to squeeze in housing somewhere in those two categories. Next step is, of course, the service of general economic interest. And if you look at this from a French perspective, maybe it works very well. From a Swedish perspective, it's a straitjacket. I don't know of any example where it actually works in Sweden. So it's a problem, but it's for universalist systems like the Swedish one. But then if we continue, I think we have to look at it from a sort of supply and demand side. If you start with the supply side, you have to remember that municipalities and other actors, they should never sell off social, public, or affordable housing. Once it's gone, it's gone. You have to guarantee.
Okay, Georgi, would you like to add something to it? Because the Polish side would like to add something to it for the floor.
Let me just finish up. Then, of course, you need to guarantee funding. And we're talking about long-term frameworks. We've heard it from you, Vienna. You're always the most popular model anywhere, in any conference I've been to. And then finally, of course, direct investment, so state aid is really crucial. Switch over quickly, and then I'll wrap up this bit, and I'm gonna pass it on. The demand side is also, of course important for the tenants and others. We need to allow them a system of laws on transparency, for instance, like the German Mietspiegel system, where you guarantee levels of rent, the Swedish utility value system, where you also allow people to compare rents. We need to make sure that people never get evicted without the proper trial in rent tribunal or a court. We need to guarantee, maybe it's a bit controversial, but I usually mention rent control. There are many types of rent control. It can be very invasive, it can be less invasive, but it's worth discussion, I think. Finally, I would also say social dialogue is very important. You have to involve the people that live in the housing to have a say. Freedom of association is something very important. Now I speak on my other leg, the Swedish union. Freedom of association is at the core of the Swedish model. We have had tenancy unions for 100 years now. And of course, it shows to a certain extent in a stable kind of housing market. So with that said, I think it's time for me to pass on the word.
Yeah, I think you've opened the Pandora's box of housing problems, really. But let's look for solutions. Yeah, Bulgaria solutions.
Yeah.
Come on. No, only problems from us, but I came here to, to find solutions, especially from Vienna, of course, but not only. What we have in my district is it's very diverse. It has like the highest prices of property and the lowest prices of property in Sofia. And it's all concentrated around an area around the airport where some of the Roma community lives, and that keeps the prices low, and also goes to south to the mountain almost. So it's a very nice place to live in, actually. But talking about the policy of the previous guys that were ruling our city, even the last mandate when I was in office, but the decisions are made in the municipal council, thousands of apartments were sold. I managed to sell only 2. I managed to keep every public property and sold only 2. And the decisions to sell them were taken before I stepped in office. But thousands and thousands of apartments. And I think it's a crime against the society, because we are not filling in. What I'm doing right now is talking about, you said public-private partnership, but I'm talking with people that are interested in building housing for the market, but like 30 or 40% of it to stay for the municipality. And we provide the land. And these are the projects I'm working right now on. We also need kindergartens in Sofia. And so I'm working on another project where they built, because we just managed to change the law that we can have now a kindergarten in the parterre, how do you call it, the first floor. And so I'm working on projects where we give the land, they build a block of flats, and on the first floor we have a kindergarten. So we're working on many solutions, and I think that the most important thing is not only to stay in Sofia, but to go around and find solutions that are already there, not to think of the hot water again to invent it. Yeah.
I have one question as I meet someone from Bulgaria and I can talk about it. You have quite a low level of financialization of the housing market. So mortgage to GDP level is one of the lowest within the European Union. Is it done on purpose that you do not want, the banking capital, but commercial banking capital to finance housing purchases and housing construction? Or is it something that just happened because you did not develop the financial markets problem? How is it?
I think it's because of the banks themselves. They didn't want to, they consider our market quite risky.
And why? Why? market risk?
Because if you look around Sofia, even in my district, there are 4 or 5 very big buildings that are left because it was like a scheme. They started building, they sold everything, and they just disappeared.
So institutional risks. Yeah. Okay.
I can answer to that.
Okay, yeah, you're
I have my personal thing.
and you're a bank
Yes. So
Persons.
on one hand, when it comes to construction companies investing in new projects, they prefer to not to get financing from the bank because the market is so hot that they pre-sell on design already. A big portion of what they need as working capital. Because otherwise they'll have to mortgage, it's complicated, they have apart from paying interest. So on one hand, this is the way they prefer to work. On the other hand, when we talk about mortgage loans to residents, the market is quite developed, but you have to consider that the interest rate in Bulgaria is based on SOFIBOR, which is linked to the Bulgarian lev, not Euribor, and the bank's central bank is now currently not increasing the basis, so loans are easily accessible. They are not influenced by
Credit affordability is higher.
So
Okay.
that's the other story. And I don't know the statistics. I haven't checked what you mentioned earlier about the relationship with GDP, but the mortgage portfolios of commercial banks are quite substantial.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that comment. And now let's turn to Poland. We are for those foreign guests here. We are at a very interesting moment. Recently in October, we had our elections, parliamentary election. There was a change in power. And now the new governing coalition is trying to coin its new housing policy. And what do you think about this housing policy? Do you see any good ideas at the horizon? Grzegorz referred to some, credit subsidies, but maybe you see some other good housing policies that are right now developed here in Poland that can be shared by other countries in Europe. Anna?
That's a tricky question. However, I would like to say about the new housing programs, which was introduced, frankly speaking, was introduced, and after a half year, it was closed since the demand and the demand was such a huge that government expected that the safe 2% loan program will be for 160,000 households for 5 years. And only in the first half of the last year, the government, not the government, but the banks, the number of loans was over 90,000, only in the half year. And of course, there are the positive and negatives of such a program, but the government would like to implement the new housing loan program, but the regulations will be more available to people who can't afford, and the cost of loan will be dependent on the income, and there will be more restricted levels of such programs. However, it is predicted that the number of households who would like to take such a loan will be also higher than for typical mortgage. And the question is why we have such a big interest in cheap the low cost loans. And frankly speaking, the question is what has happened on the market with the price of a house, and there was frankly speaking, a shock on the building market, and everything what was on market, they say in a few weeks, and flats were reserved, but the prices has decreased 10%. Or 15, sometimes on 20% during a half year. So it is not a good example of recommendation, but we would like to say that if we write the good regulations, and when we explain which households could buy a house or a flat which is financed by such a form of subsidy. So this is the one of the good solution. But I'm afraid that it will be too costly for our public debt. And the most important thing, from my point of view, is the energy transformation and the cost of renovating the building which are on the market. In Poland, only in Poland, we have more than 1 million buildings which are called as the energy vampires, and all buildings must be in a few years zero energy. So therefore, we should think about what kind of solutions could be implemented to improve the level of the quality of such flats, such houses, as well as how to encourage households to think about changing their way of thinking, that such zero energy buildings will be more expensive than traditional.
Maximilian? If I may comment on this, I think the Polish policy in the past has been very much focused not on affordable housing, but on ownership. That is one thing. And ownership in new stock to a large extent. And new stock is built by 95% residential developers, which are not for non-profit, but for profit. So this is the highest part of the market, the most expensive ones, where businesses make money. This is not affordable housing. This is for sure not affordable housing. The affordable housing part, we heard yesterday in the different panels, this is 5% of the stock in Poland. This is the communal housing, and everything what is built new, as I said, 95% roughly, this is by private developers with business ideas to make a profit. So the Polish government in the past and now has very much focused on enabling households to get cheaper loans, to get into these new buildings, into new apartments, but at a very high price level. I'm missing very much here in Poland initiatives also on the government level for rental housing. You know, we had the privatization wave in Poland in the 1990s, even a little bit earlier, and this is a theme across CEE, the post-socialist part of the European Union, that we had a lot of privatization, and the stock that is left for municipalities is very complicated because you have this kind of Swiss cheese, one building where you have a couple of units which are still belonging to the communities, the cities, and the rest has been sold to the owner-occupiers right now already. Beforehand, it was an allocation system, so people were just living there, they could buy it. And that was cheap to get in, but some of the people that bought it in the 90s today don't have the money cannot afford to keep it, to modernize it, to do the thermal insulation, to get into all the things that the European Union right now demands for energy efficiency. So we have a very complicated and complex situation in the communal housing stock, and it's very tiny. And what is being built in new stock is market-based, so market-based prices, and a very tiny portion right now is being built for rent also by developers and by funds. And these are mainly foreign funds. I've been working for one of those funds as well in the past a little bit more than 2 years. And this is a part of the housing stock that is aimed for rental housing, but it's also not for the very affordable part of the rental housing, but the middle class. It's not luxury, but it's middle class. What is missing is the rental housing stock in the affordable segment. And one initiative I see that is lying since 2016, and there's a new approach right now from the new government, is REITs. So real estate investment trusts, where Polish money from Polish individuals, but also foreign money, can be channeled into new developments for rental housing. And this can be on very different levels. There can be different mandates, can be co-financing from banking institutions and so on. We're missing that entirely, and there's no regulatory framework right now in place to do it.
I need to pick your brain on that just for a second. Why do you think that in the rental segment of the market, there are only medium and premium class housing provided? Is it because there is no money into affordable housing? Is it because there is lack of institutions Johan was referring to? Or is it a lack of government support to develop affordable rental housing? What do you think? What is the main reason, or all of those reasons are there in place?
I mean, I think it's good to have a look at different other countries and see why that worked over there and where we're here in Poland or also in other parts of Central Eastern Europe. I think it worked with private capital in places where there's regulation in place, there is financing in place, cheaper financing, and there's a political will as well to invest. And from a point of view of a business, when does it make sense? When you earn money. And why would you go into social housing or affordable housing? You earn less money than on the private market. But why do you go there? Because it's stable money, it's stable income. And someone has to guarantee it. We heard yesterday about this initiative of the rental housing agencies, which is a very nice initiative, but very tiny one still in scale. As of now, let's see how it evolves. But the main reason for those private owners of the apartments to go into this is they don't want to have the hassle with renting out with the tenants that can not pay the rents, that can destroy the apartment, the property, and so on. So someone has to guarantee it. If someone comes to a private fund, Polish money or foreign money, and says, you take this, you don't get out 5% plus as a return, but you get 4%, but we guarantee it. And you get, in the best case, or on top, some tax, let's say, preferential tax treatment. Then suddenly it might make sense. And this is what happens in other countries where it works.
Okay. Professor Lawson is not only a well-renowned housing policy specialist, but a mind reader as well. I was thinking about, maybe someone from the audience can join us. Professor Lawson would be great with her knowledge. And then Professor Lawson is here. Okay.
Okay. Yes, I do know a lot about this topic, actually, real estate investment trusts, but I also know about what you call maybe more virtuous circuits of investment, whereby through the construction of, if you like, housing construction convertible bonds, there's a great desire from households to invest in something and invest in their future security. If they feel they haven't got a pension that's adequate to cover that in old age. So they're looking to property, and they're doing that on a massive scale. for demographic reasons and for the failure of our welfare states, all kinds of reasons. However, REITs, of course, provide some sort of liquid way in which they can do it, but you can also create virtuous ways of doing that. And in Austria, they did so with a housing construction convertible bond. So that now they're bonds which are actually in the portfolios of around 300,000 pension holders in Austria, and that raises funds via Wohnbaubanken, housing banks, which invest in a responsible landlord, a regulated, limited profit housing association. So that is what I call a virtuous circuit of, investing in housing, and that provides the lowest cost, longer term loans.
Is it guaranteed by municipalities? No, it's guaranteed all the housing stock.
People like to have those bonds because originally they introduced for a number of years a tax incentive on the income earned from those bonds, that people could reduce their taxable income. But after a while, they found that wasn't cost effective or necessary for people to invest in them. They just wanted something safe and secure that was similar to a government bond. Why is it safe and secure? Because there's a strong regulatory framework for auditing and monitoring of those limited profit housing associations. So it didn't need the government guarantee. They did have an initiative, and the EIB was also part of it, to have some sort of national Wohnbaubank, which the EIB could stand behind. A similar model is in the UK, but it's actually a non-profit housing finance corporation. So both those models helped Australia in converting its very risky, expensive loans for affordable housing into an intermediary called National Housing Finance Investment Corporation. I worked on that for 5 years, and it's now called Housing Australia. So it's very, very possible that we can create virtuous circuits for housing investment in well-regulated, responsible entities. It just takes the imagination, the courage, and the commitment to do so, and some helpful minds along the way.
But these are rental housing, isn't it? Also in Australia. So
well, today Housing Australia actually provides guarantees for home ownership as well as long-term investment for non-profit affordable rental, which is registered and regulated under the national regulator. So they give that privileged investment, long-term favourable investment, to entities they know are committed to long-term affordable rental. So that's different. You see the similar model in Finland also, and in Austria and in Denmark. So it's about, being creative financially, but for the virtuous circuit.
And one last question to you, if I have you here. Countries here in the region, into Central and Eastern Europe, are called super ownership countries. So there's a mindset that you need to have. You mentioned that by yourself. Australia was also an ownership country quite heavily. How do you convince people that renting is cool?
Well, the problem is that renting's absolutely not cool, unless it's adequate and secure and provides long-term prospects, and that you have other things that you can invest in that is sustainable and productive and worthwhile for the economy and the society. So Germany, Switzerland, they're all renter societies. Australia hasn't been, for over 150 years. So, but the thing is, now, of course, 40% of our households are renters. Home ownership is going down fast, really fast, amongst young and middle incomes. So we're having to find ways to achieve that secure dream and prospects by reinventing renting. And I think that's why everyone's so fascinated with what's going on in Austria at the moment.
If I may add on that,
Sure.
I think there must be a balance between rental and ownership. And in Poland and in most socialist part of Europe, we had this privatization wave and everything became into home ownership. Right now, we have to move one step back and get back into the housing, rental housing, for one reason. Rental housing provides flexibility. And there are moments in life where people need to rent. You have the life cycle of people that move out of the house as student or early workforce and so on, and you need to be flexible. And if the only entrance to the housing market is to buy, then those young people are not able to go into those places to buy something. You need student housing, you need affordable housing, you need rental housing in general. And I entirely agree what has been said. This rental housing has to be very stable and secure. And then we have Sweden, for instance, we have Switzerland, we have Germany, with a lot of regulation, Netherlands, Austria. And then we have Poland, where the standard contract is a 1-year contract. And when it ends, you don't know if you can prolong it. You don't know how much more the landlord will ask you for the next year, and so on and so on. There are rental contracts in Poland that would allow long-term rentals, but the landlords shying away from that because they are also afraid that their entire income from renting is prone to risk. And this is also, you have to understand the landlord's perspective. It might be just a person who earns additional income or main income, for instance, as a retired lady that still owns a second apartment, rents it out. And they also need security. So regulation, we need to have regulation on the housing market, on the rental market. We also need the rental market. And we have been focusing very much in this part of Europe on home ownership in the past. In Germany, where I come from originally, there was the other way around because the rental market was so strong. They have been promoting home ownership in the past. Here, I think we need to promote rental housing to some extent, and I don't even think about getting to such a share like in Germany or Switzerland or Sweden. Probably we don't need that, but we need some part of the market to be flexible.
That's a good point. But I would like to add that the most important thing is the fact that in such countries like Scandinavian countries or Western Union countries, in 60s and 70s last century, the public expenditure on housing and the especially for the municipal housing and the social housing, this expenditure was more than 6% to 12% of GDP. Currently, according to the newest data, in the European Union, the public expenditure on housing and also the community amenities amounted of equivalent of 1% of GDP in 2022. So if the governments will not increase this ratio up to minimum 3% of GDP, we'll still have still the problem with affordable housing. And we couldn't be able to solve the problem of renting cheap flats for people who can't afford buy it.
Okay, so we are coming to one bottom line from our discussion: financing, and financing from various sources, from debt obligations, from banking sector, both purely commercial and kind of public banking sector like EBI, and also from REITs, investment trusts, municipal sources. Maria would like to add something. I do remember, Gaudi, that you would like.
Yes, I just wouldn't want us to forget about land policy, because we tend in these discussions to focus a lot on financing and where does the money come from, and we tend to forget about the land that is actually at the beginning and at the end of everything. So I think looking into how, well, it may be municipalities and regions, it can be national states, it can be national agencies, how they deal with the land. On the one hand, I'm talking about the land they own themselves. On the one hand, which they should be probably leasing and not selling. Let's start with this. And then how they acquire land, at what prices. Do they keep building up land reserves is a second question. And third question that is, to me, very important is, do they use the most powerful instrument that they have, and that is changing land use categories to do either one, introduce, like Vienna has done, a land use category that will regulate land prices because land prices need regulation, or will they, on the other hand, introduce some kind of land value capture, which can also provide additional money to be spent then on subsidies for social housing construction, just to give you an example. Although in this case, I think we need to be a little bit, a tiny bit cautious, because what I have found out is that in most places in the world where we have land value capture, we end up with the public hand speculating. So that's another story. But the point I'm trying to make in the end is that the land needs to be affordable. If the land is not affordable, and if land prices are not directly or indirectly regulated, then we always end up in prices for housing spiraling upwards.
Yeah, so keep control over land. Jory?
I just wanted to say that regulation is needed, because at least this is my experience, this is what I see, and I'm trying to collect knowledge how it's done everywhere in the world. Australia may be a good also example, but I think that we should maybe meet next year and see how and follow the development in each and every country. And I hope that then Bulgaria would be a little bit one step forward with more legislation. I hope so. Right now we're in a turbulent again. The next, it's going to be the 7th election for the last 3 years. So, yeah, but I hope it's like for a longer period and we have some stability. That's why people are like kind of afraid to make big investments, and also in Bulgaria. Yeah.
Okay. Please remember, dear audience, that you have an open seat here. Yeah, please come, just have a seat. If it's free, you can just join us and then ask a question or give us a comment or your experience. So yeah, please introduce yourself. So,
hello everyone. I'm Olivia Wierucka. I'm a special planist, and I'm also represent University of Łódź, and it's a pleasure to be here. I would like to talk about Vienna model, and when I hear about Vienna, I think that I hear about a different kind of world. When people like me in my age, I'm 24 by the way, can have this independence, and with Polish policy, I think that with these laws, I'm scared that my next house will be, a tent in the forest. And I have this strong support from my family, but I know that not everyone have these opportunities and this support. And you talk about the chance in the prices about 10 and 50%. I heard about 140 the change in one night in one apartment in Warsaw, so in the city. And yes, and I heard about the system in Vienna, which I think that it works. And on the other hand, in Poland, it's not. So I have a question for you. What's your opinion about it? Do you think what is the reason that it works in Vienna and not in Poland? Maybe it's a leftist politics or something else?
That's for me. Okay. So I think that it's been addressed sometimes today that in Poland, the social housing reserves that were there have been sold off. And this is not a problem only in Poland. It's happened everywhere. I mean, I don't know if you followed Berlin and the discussion there, even discussing to expropriate again so that they can get hands on what they have sold off in the first place, with all the scandals that this means right now politically. So I'm trying to say that I think that it all starts at the back of our minds. And we have to take some very basic decisions. Call them political. I call them actually rational. And that is, in the first place, to say we need to embark in social housing, because social housing is for everybody and not just for vulnerable groups. So we need to open, to rethink how we look at social housing and to understand that this is the way a society can actually create vast reserves of housing units that are affordable to middle class, to put it in simple terms. So this is the first thing. The second thing is we need to free ourselves from the obsession of having to possess something, which is a trap. Now, this, I think, is the most tough thing to do. And I love quoting Alejandro Aravena, a Chilean architect, who said, it's not about belongings, it's about belonging. And I think that he's so right? So it's about saying goodbye to ownership and embarking into rental. And I think that realizing these two things are the things we need to fight for lead to everything else. Because as soon as we have taken the decision that we need our cities and our regions to embark in social housing, we can then look into the details of how do we regulate land prices, how do we go about financing, what do subsidies look like, are they low cost, so low interest, long-term loans provided, let's say, by the region, example given, or by a local development bank, or do we work together with banks, etc., etc. And the last thing I have to say about Vienna is, actually, it's two things. One is that, of course, if you have a social housing tradition of 100 years, currently you have in Vienna approximately 230,000 municipally owned social housing units, and then another 200 and approximately 50,000 subsidized social housing units owned by limited profit, strictly regulated and controlled corporations. So this is almost 500,000 units. And this is huge. This is something with which you can indirectly regulate everything. You have availability, you have proximity, you have flexibility, you have affordability, you have everything you need in order to regulate a housing market indirectly. And in addition to this, what we tend to forget is that in Vienna, private rents are regulated in their majority. So there is a cap on private rents there, which is something that has disappeared almost all over the world. I personally think, I'm hoping I'm not shocking you, we need to revisit this. But let's say that is something for a conference in itself. How do you regulate it in a way that you don't produce the next disaster to talk about then in conferences for the next 30 years?
Oh no, I wanted to ask that question to Johan. How to do it? How to regulate rental markets in a way that doesn't cause a disaster in the meantime? Because Maria here is great speaking about goals, and it definitely suits the heart of the young generation to hear about a Vienna example. But please remember, as you said yesterday, that's 100 years, 1 century of actions. Professor Lawson does not agree, okay. I see you nodding your head. But still, it's a very long story to go for Vienna. And we are somewhere at the beginning, or at least at the end of the beginning of the housing story here in in the region. And that's why I wanted to ask you how to, introduce regulations, rent regulations, tenant-landlord relations into our super ownership societies without, causing a disaster. Because if you say, okay, let's do rent controls and let's do regulations, tenant protections, and make it more restrictive, a lot of landlords would say, no, in that world, I don't want any tenants. Yeah, I just leave my house empty because I don't want to engage in it. And that's typically what you will hear in the Polish newspapers when you propose that kind of an idea. So how to, introduce it? What's the path to the goal, to the perfect goal that we have?
I don't know if I'm really going to be able to respond to a question like that. I mean, you said something about a next conference. Maybe we should have a next conference about that. But that's a really difficult question. But I do think that you have to connect sort of like, I already mentioned initially these things about transparency, social dialogue and so forth and so forth. Of course, it's all about from a sort of legalistic point of view, you have to balance two interests against each other. But if you then look at sort of the Swedish market, where we have had a low yield, but a stable yield over many, many years for the owners, I think that the kind of somewhere in this force wheel between regulation and a stable long-term yield, that's where the answer lies. That's the best answer I can give. It's short. We have to spend the next conference on it, but I think that's as good as it gets today.
Yeah, but is it really? And here I go to the Polish example. Wonderful. Thank you, Maximilian, for taking up the mic. Is it really possible? Is it a feasible solution for a country like Poland or Bulgaria or Czech Republic, where we have in our DNA instability of the legal system, and it changes and everything is changing all the time. A new government is coming and a new government is, inventing the wheel once over again, and everything is unstable. Can you deliver here in our institutional system a stable, long-term perspective, low but stable yield in the renting segment?
Start with that. I think there's a stigma in this part of Europe for socialist or lefty politics, meaning that there is subsidies for rental housing, because this region for 45, 50 years has been communist, and there was a housing allocation system. We have to keep that in mind to some extent to understand the mindset of people here about politics and so on. Right now, when we go back, let's say, into evaluating, thinking about rental housing, affordable housing, social housing, we have to think about that the market is not able to deliver housing for each and everyone in an affordable way that everyone can go in every place in the country, in the capital city, in bigger cities, in all places, just for market prices. This is not happening in reality. And second thing I would like to comment, Johan is representing the tenants. And you just mentioned, Johan, that you need to look at both sides. The landlords are the other side. And the landlords who are there in this part of the world, it's not institutions. Institutions have very small, tiny share of this market here. They have a huge share in Central and Western Europe, but they have a very tiny share here. They're just building it up. The main landlord here in Poland, also probably Bulgaria and so on, are private individuals. In all our statistics, when we say 85% home ownership in Poland, that's not true. We don't have any statistics saying how many of those units which are privately owned, because this is what the statistics say, is used for own purposes, own housing purposes, and which part is rented out. And this is not represented in our statistics. And whatever GUS, so the Polish Statistical Office, sends over to Europe for those statistics is not true or based on surveys. And that's the same for Bulgarian statistics, same for Romanian statistics.
I want to say that in Bulgaria, it's so skewed, that the whole statistics, because people are actually not declaring that they rented a house because the homeowner wants to evade taxes.
Same here.
We know that story, sadly.
Just to finish this one thought about this perspective of the homeowners, I think the regulation is needed for both sides. You have to give security for the tenant, and you give good options for the tenant, but you also have to secure the landlord. Because if you don't do that, there's a mismatch. And in Polish news, it's always so difficult to rent out. People are devastating. You don't get rid of people that don't pay the rents and so on. Statistically, it's below 1%. But still, if it happens and you are the one owner of this one unit and you don't get paid and your life depends on it, it's a problem. Yeah. So big institutions like REITs, which can bundle a lot of different people to invest in something, and they can deal with those things with more time, with more resources and financing. This is something we should really look at. And this is also part where we can engage private capital, from private individuals and from institutions.
Hugh, you wanted to have a follow-up comment?
Yes, some conclusion from this part of conversation that I think that we need to connect special planning and involving people in this process, also affordable housing, and maybe some strategy, marketing strategy, that you don't need to be an owner and that rent is fancy, maybe motto the next event, that rent is fancy. So thank you very much.
Good time for a conference. Thank you. If you want to just a minute. Okay, Maria, I wanted to comment shortly.
I wanted to add.
Oh, yeah.
It's on. Now, we're talking about rent regulation now. And of course, we need to separate rent regulation from sort of tenancy legislation. It's two separate things. But if we talk about tenancy-focused legislation, I don't know why we should be so afraid of this. I mean, don't we all need some kind of framework to work inside? I mean, it's like scare tactics to talk about that regulation of tenants' rights is something negative. If we look at sort of like the EU competition agency, well, no one says that the EU is not a competitive market because we have competition laws in place. So why can't we do the same with the housing market? I think it's like the one is not different from the other in some ways, at least.
Okay, let me provide you an example from a Central Eastern European. So, do you own a house that you rent out? No. Okay. Yeah, that might be the problem. So, for example, here in Warsaw, you have a house and you have a tenant who is not treating your house very well. He's not paying you to rent. He's just throwing out parties, going on with it. And then you go to the tenant and say, please leave. I said, no. And there is almost nothing you can do with it. You can start a whole eviction process, but it takes time. Throughout the pandemic period, you were not able to evict anyone. So the whole tenant that doesn't pay you money and destroys your real estate property was just sitting there. I know that's a tiny part of the market, but that's on the mind of every landlord here across the region, from Estonia to Bulgaria. And that's how landlords think here. Sorry. What do you think about that? What would you say to such kind of a guy that waits 2 years for an eviction?
Maybe I'll shock you now, and maybe I'll shock my other friends in the IUT. But in fact, evictions is kind of okay, but it has to be undertaken within the legal framework that is available. It shouldn't.
And you have to have social housing that are provided for those people. And there's a lack of social municipal housing for those that are evicted. And that's the full problem here.
And that's what I'm talking about. A well-regulated tenancy rights catalog, for instance, that might be the solution.
May I add something to that?
Sure.
I just wanted to add that example given in Greece. If you have such a tenant, you still have to pay tax as if they were paying. Yes, because as in Bulgaria, because in many cases tenants, landlords will not do proper contracts, the state does not trust that it is true that the tenant is not paying. So as a landlord, you still have to pay the tax while you're processing for eviction that may take, let's say, up to 2 years. So you can imagine how horrible all this is. So that is the, let's say, the anecdotic part of it. And I think we can all tell horrible stories. The systemic side of this is that small ownership leads us to all these situations, right? You have people that will take all these loans. They will do whatever they can so that they can possess their own apartment and perhaps one to rent off. They will find out that they're not able to invest in many cases, and we will see what trap this is now that we're starting to discuss decarbonization, energy uplift for all these owner-occupied or, small properties. They find out that they cannot deal with tenants who do not pay. They find out in the end that it's a trap. And the point I'm trying to make is that in the end, we find out that small ownership is not a good idea. And that it takes larger, let's say, bigger entities, larger entities, in order to be able to deal with this. Be it private property, be it social housing. I think that we need to understand this as well.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with you. And then we get to another problem, and we need another solution about people who would like to save for their future. Because the mindset here in a super ownership country is that we buy one house, then we buy another house, the other house is rented out, and then we buy the third one. And this is our, safety net for retirement. And then you need to convince those people, okay, do not buy your third house, invest in bonds, because that's safe as well, and that provides you also a decent profit. But then people say, oh no, financial market, oh, I don't know that. I know for 200 years that having my real estate is something that's good for my retirement and for my kids. I cannot deliver them assets, banking assets. Yeah, that's the mindset of the population. It's not my opinion, but still, there's something that we need to tackle. Okay, we have a new panelist on our table. Please introduce yourself.
I hope this is all okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Anka Dragomir. I'm a youth delegate representing Habitat for Humanity Romania. I have a question to address each of the speakers, but I would like first to hear from Maria. I will address it in a general way, and please don't mind my phone. It's just an extension of my hand. How do local governments engage or should engage with residents and stakeholders to identify housing needs and prioritize funding allocation for affordable housing initiatives? And what mechanisms are in place or should be in place for ongoing community input and feedback?
Well, if I think of Vienna now, I think that there is a part of the job that needs to be done top-down and part of the job that needs to be done bottom-up. What I'm trying to say is that I think that if I look into the data, I do not need to engage much with local communities to find out that they have a problem. I know because of the data. I mean, think of the data we've seen before. If I'm an Italian example given person in administration, and I know that approximately 80% of my young people have to live with their parents until they're 30 or even beyond this age, I know that I have a problem. So I think that, let's say that the top-down approach to it is realizing that you need to do something. Now, when it comes to designing not only the policy, but also to getting down to doing things, I think that it is crucial that you involve local society. And let me give you just one example. It may be that and it should be that you also involve in these processes. Example given, housing developers. You'd be willing, example given, to create a limited profit branch so that they can engage in social housing, which, by the way, in Vienna is very often the case. So we have the historical big players in social housing, but we have also private developers that will create limited profit branches. And the reason why they do it is because it is such a stable business case. It's such a good opportunity to have long-term, right? It's stable and it's long-term, the benefit. So you will be well advised to involve this part of the ecosystem, but then it will be crucial to also involve local communities in order to create, example given, collaborative housing models, cooperative housing models. And it will be a very good way to do it by starting with smaller projects, most probably, because it's very tough to start with doing a huge development straight from point zero. So let me take you away from Vienna and give you the excellent example of the wonderful small city of Tübingen in Germany, who actually started with this around the millennium with a very small budget that they put into a revolving fund, following the example that I have been actually highlighting all the way along. So it's low interest loans long term, and whatever money returns, they put into this fund again and use, of course, for housing again. And what they're doing is a kind of subsidized collaborative ownership where people do not own the house or the apartment, they own shares. And this way they have a check that this will never enter the speculative market, because if people move out, they can have their money back in terms of the shares, but then the community will decide who will be the next tenant. And the conditions for the next tenant will be exactly the same, because it's not about making a profit, right? So this is an excellent example of how to go about involving local communities, involving landowners, I don't have the time to tell this, okay, but what they will also do is to involve landowners straight from the beginning in these processes, to negotiate land prices because they're so important. They have, though, the possibility legally to expropriate. And everybody knows that they might be using it, which brings them, of course, a very strong position in negotiating. As far as I know, they have never expropriated up to today. So looking into who owns the land, how can we have these people benefit? They should be making profit from it, but just not crazy profit, right? How do we involve local community? How do we create collaborative housing models? How do we involve housing developers in order to have a shared strategy and a shared way to move forward? I think it's the only way to start.
Okay, thank you. I think, Borislava, that's a good question to you as well. Let us peek into your kitchen. How do you do advisory? How do you, for example, the Czech example, if you advise the Czech government on municipal housing, how do you design the institutions there? Do you invite all those stakeholders and discuss? Do you look from a bird eye view? Do you look more on research of academics? How do you do it?
Well, the short answer is we do it all, and it depends on the case. The Czech example is just probably more exceptional one because it's a very complex assignment. It took us internally to develop it more. It took us more than a year, and we set up an internal team comprising of members from a lot of different departments in the bank. So not only advisory, but also we had our experts from the projects directorate, we had bankers, we had economists, etc. Just internally for us to be more prepared to identify also the needs of our Czech counterparties, because sometimes even the client doesn't know exactly what are their needs and needs some help on this end as well. On the other side, we have a very committed client, so on their end, the setup is also very organized with a very broad working group comprising of representatives not only from the government. And on the third side, we have the consultant we have hired to support us in bringing up the assignment, in developing it. and reaching this objective.
Do you have also representatives of municipalities within the group?
No, because currently we are working on this horizontal level where we have to develop the legal framework, which is not existing, let's say, in the country, so countrywide. And then when we get to the project-specific level, we will have the municipalities playing a much bigger role.
Okay, because I don't know, let me explain my question. Because as I talk to different people in Poland, stakeholders of the housing sector, I see that there is a coordination problem between the central level and municipal level. And many municipalities have their very own housing policies. They are not complementary with each other. So sometimes you ask 5 mayors of big cities, everyone has his own or her own ideas about how to run housing policies, and you cannot have one fit-them-all regulation. Do you see this kind of a problem in your advisory that, you need to say, okay, at a central level is one regulation, but then we need to adjust it to different municipalities or not?
Well, it's not our call, actually, because we provide options and variety of solutions, and it's up to the client also to choose what's the best fit for their purposes. But for example, we started also discussing more intensely the affordable housing advisory in Croatia, where we see group of municipalities, like the 4 largest cities, they are trying to work together to find a way to do it in a more standardized way. But there also we don't have the legal framework developed to such an extent countrywide, but we see the opportunity also to work on municipal level and try to build it up. So it's really very individual, for good or for bad. If you have a standard solution, one size fits all, it's, you say, oh, perfect, it's super easy. You just replicate. But it's never the case, even within one country. So inevitable that you have to pick and choose different solutions.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to answer the question? Okay. Thank you. Anyone else would like to join us? Now it's a possibility because we are slowly getting to an end. Oh, wonderful. We have next panelist with us. Okay, we can move on with you. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Mateusz. I'm from NGO, faith-based organization Diakonia Poland. My question is, because we are speaking about the house as a human right, as a part of the infrastructure, but we see that more and more people are treating house more like a financial instrument, throwing money because it's a low risk and the high profit. So what do you think about this? And should we, especially in Poland, when we don't have much regulation, we don't have the catastrophe tax like other countries. So what do you think about this, treating house as a financial instrument? Because we know that for some people, this is the only purpose of the house, like to buy it, to sell it. We have the flippers. We have the example of that. So what do you think about this?
Thank you. You reminded me of the question I had very early in our talk about housing as a social right versus the housing as a means to wealth paradigms that are functioning in Europe. And there are two other things that you brought up from a very philosophical perspective on housing policy. First, the financialization of housing and the process. Does it serve the public good or not? How can we, harness it to get most out of it? Because I think it's inevitable that housing financialization is going on thanks to the banking sector. And then we have the commodification of housing. It is also another term that's very important. So whether houses are treated as commodities or not, because if you look at sociological studies here in Central and Eastern Europe, we see that housing is treated more as a familial good, so a patrimony, yeah. And what kind of housing paradigm do we need? That's my general question. If I might move it on top of your question, what do you think?
just adding on that, Maria said it already to some extent. It's not only homes, apartments, houses. It's also land. It's the whole real estate. It's about ownership or common good. And in the past, if I remember my studies correctly, there's the Georgian way, Henry George, looking at ownership in general, that it's evil and that land shouldn't be owned because there is an end to it. I think in the current legal framework and in the places where we are in economy-based or market economy-based society, we cannot entirely get back to this, that it's all common good. The property rights are too strong, and there is a big lobby behind it, and there are also some reasons for it, why it works, and we can discuss politically whether that extreme makes more sense or that extreme makes more sense, common good or the property rights. I think in all the European Union countries, we have property rights, some very strong, some a little weaker, but all strong. And to change this is very difficult, and I think also in that moment, not possible, not to discuss whether it's right or wrong. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, but I think you also mentioned that before in Poland and also elsewhere, people also invest in properties for their own safety, for their retirement, for their children, and so on and so on. And then there are some that have a couple of apartments and others that don't have the money to have even one, and even not, in some cases, can even not rent one. And this is obviously extreme. And in my opinion, in this current framework, what we have, we need different options. We need rental options. Let's say for the sake of argument, we also need some ownership options, but we need them on different levels, different affordability levels.
Do you mean that we need different housing paradigms? So some part of the housing market is a means to wealth, some is a social right, and everything magically.
Housing is always a shelter as well. Yeah, the very initial part is that housing is needed for people to live. It's a basic right and a basic need, and this is the start. And this is where we always should come back when we get too extreme on the property rights. We should get back to this part that it's a human right, and everyone needs housing. There shouldn't be homelessness. There shouldn't be people that cannot live somewhere where they want to, and so on and so on. Yeah, but I just leave it there because we can discuss in hours on this, because it's about politics and so on.
Yeah, that's why we have it at the end. I would like to give floor to Anna, and then Maria, I will get back to you.
For years, Poland was a low-income country, and therefore our households would like to have something for their own. And the high rate of the ownership in the housing sector has the reasons from the history. And what is worth to add, I would like to say something about one of the first initiative in Poland, which is related to the municipal housing. And there is one project financed by the National Center for Research and Development. But frankly speaking, it was financed by the European Union funds. And this is the project called Demonstrator of Technology. In Mysłowice, this is the city situated in the south of Poland, in the Silesia region. They built one building which consists of 29 apartments, ranging from 45 to over 75 square meters. And this is a modular building. What is something fantastic? This is a zero energy building. And frankly speaking, it is plus energy building. Since due to using the technology, this is the first example of the modern multifamily social building in Poland. thanks to using the new technology, the photovoltaics and other solutions, this building can produce more energy than households can consume. And the cost of this building for these 29 apartments was about 5.1 million euros. And if we compare the cost of construction, it was about 8,800 zlotys per square meter. And of course, everything was finished. So this building, each flat was completely finished with the bathroom, with kitchen, with all needed equipment. And with this furnitures and the equipment, the cost per one square meter was about 12,000 zlotys. And this is the one of solutions. And this innovative fund, the innovative way of financing such housing is a best example for affordable housing. Also, the one of the way is the fact that in this building, the local government decided to rent flats not only for the poorest citizens, households, but also for people who would like to start their life and they would like to work in this city. And there are many other cities who are interested in such modular building, and also such form of modular building will be the future of the next years for the next years.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. But it's brought another thought to my mind that we did not discuss anyhow here, and I just will, I think, leave it at that. But we did not discuss corporate involvement in the housing market. As one of the slides, I think Grzegorz was mentioning before in the introductory speech, he said that we had corporate housing. So for people that are employed at a given company, which was quite a standard in the socialist times, and then it was slowly phased out and sold out. And as I heard the speech by a representative of IKEA, I was thinking, okay, wonderful that you're doing quite a lot for people with affordability issues, but you can also go for corporate housing yourself for your own employees would be quite interesting. But that's just a question mark and thought that I would like to share with you. Maria, you wanted to comment on the issue and the question.
I just wanted to comment very briefly, adding that example, given the German constitution has this sentence in it that says that ownership obliges, meaning that there are obligations towards the common good that results from ownership. And that I think a very good thing to do would be to look into all constitutions of European countries and integrate a sentence like this, because I agree with you that we have very strong ownership rights in all European countries in the end. But if this one sentence exists or not makes really a huge difference. And I can tell you by comparing Germany, that has this sentence, and Austria, that doesn't have it. And I'll leave it at that because I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add something. That actually exactly 10 years ago, I was living in Vienna in a passive house, and my bills for electricity were plus. I had to pick up some money because this passive block of flats was actually producing more electricity than we were using. Okay, thank you for all the comments. We are running out of time, so I need to wrap up the discussion. And while wrapping up the discussion, I must say that organizers should be grateful
to the panelists, not only for being here with us and sharing their thoughts, but also for proposing the topics of several next conferences. Yeah, so we have ownership oblige, rent is fancy. So yeah, we can discuss and talk about rents, about ownership, about corporate housing. Yes, so feel free to use it. You have to cooperate to it right now. Thank you to all.